At 11:20 on a Tuesday morning, three men in matching navy polos carried a glass dining table out through the front gate of a house in East Legan and loaded it onto a flatbed truck marked with the bank's logo. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the house that had taken 14 years to fill was empty enough to hear a single mosquito moving through it. The next morning at 6, a woman nobody from the bank had listed on any inventory walked through that same gate carrying her own bucket, her own broom, and a bar of blue soap she had bought with her own money, and began cleaning a house that, as far as the bank was concerned, no longer needed cleaning. What none of the men in navy polos had noticed, stacked behind a pile of garden tools they were planning to leave for the council to collect, was a water-damaged banker's box that the woman would carry out under her own arm before the sun was fully up, and keep, without telling a single person, for the next 2 years. Abina Mensah had been cleaning that house on Tete Corsi Close for 14 years, since the year the family moved in, back when the children were still small enough to ride bicycles down the long driveway. She was 52 years old, and had not missed a single Tuesday or Friday in all that time, not for her own 2 bouts of malaria, not for her younger brother's funeral in Kumasi, not for the birth of her first grandchild, which she attended on a Wednesday and was back at work by the following Tuesday regardless. She wore the same pale blue uniform dress she had been issued the year she started. Taken in twice at the waist and let back out once, the cotton gone soft and slightly gray at the collar, no matter how many times she boiled it. Underneath it, on a thin gold chain her own mother had given her in 1989, she wore a single key that had not opened anything in over a decade. The key to a storage room behind the kitchen that had been demolished during a renovation 8 years earlier. She kept wearing it anyway. Her own husband had died 11 years earlier. A transport accident on the Tema motorway that left her raising 2 children and later helping raise a grandchild on a salary that had never once been late in 14 years until the week it simply stopped. She had not told the Owusu Boateng family any of this in detail over the years, only the dates she needed off, and they had never asked for more than that. It was, she sometimes thought, the only part of the arrangement that had ever felt entirely fair to her, that her grief had never once been required to explain itself to anyone signing her payslip. She weighed 58 kilograms that year, 4 less than the year before. The difference made up mostly of the meals she skipped, so her granddaughter, Akosua, could eat breakfast before school. She had not come back to that empty house for the money. There was no money. The family had not paid her a single cedi in 14 weeks, not since the morning the man of the house, Kwadwo Owusu Boateng, sat down on the bottom step of his own staircase and told her, in a voice she had never heard him use before, that he did not know how much longer the house would still be his. What she was trying to do, that Wednesday morning, with her bucket and her bar of blue soap, was the same thing she had been trying to do every working day for 31 years, leave a room cleaner than she found it. It was the smallest, most human ambition she had, and circumstances had never once managed to take it away from her. On the morning she found out there would be no more pay, she did not put down her mop. She finished the kitchen floor first, rinsed the mop twice the way she always did, hung it to dry on the same nail it had hung on for 14 years, and only then did she ask Kwadwo, quietly, whether he had eaten that day. There was one thing about Abina that none of the Owusu Boateng family had ever asked her to do, and that she had simply always done. She did not throw away paper. Not theirs, not anyone's. For 14 years she had collected every loose document that fell behind a desk or slid under a cabinet, old receipts, school report cards, a torn page from a contract, and sorted them into labeled boxes in the garage by year, the way she had once been taught to do, as a girl of 19, working 2 years in a mission school office before her first child was born. Nobody at the house had ever noticed the system. Nobody had ever needed to. On the day the house was officially listed as bank property, a clearance supervisor named Dexter Asante arrived with a clipboard and 4 young men in matching navy polos and told Abena, without looking up from his list, that she had no business being on the property any longer. "This is bank inventory now, Auntie," he said. "You can go." He had cleared 11 properties that quarter, none of them with a household staff member still showing up to scrub the floors weeks after the family had stopped paying, and as far as his checklist was concerned, that fact did not belong anywhere on the form. Abena explained, evenly, the way she explained everything, that she had not been told to stop coming, only told that she would not be paid, and that those were 2 different instructions. Dexter did not have a line on his clipboard for that distinction either. He told her again to leave, more slowly this time, the way people speak to someone they have already decided will not understand them the first time. Dexter was not unusual among the men who did his job. He had been trained, over 6 years with the bank's recovery unit, to see a repossessed property the way an accountant sees a spreadsheet: assets, liabilities, a closing balance, and a 52-year-old woman with a bucket did not appear on any line of that balance. He went home that evening, as he did most evenings, satisfied that he had completed his list correctly, and gave the encounter no further thought until a letter arrived for him, nearly 2 years later, from a law chambers near Osu. She did not leave. She finished the floor she was standing on, picked up her bucket, and walked out through the same gate she had walked through twice a week for 14 years, past the security post, where a guard named Patrick, who had waved her in and out of that gate 900 times, kept his eyes on his phone and did not wave at all. 2 doors down, behind a high wall topped with broken glass, a neighbor who had once sent the family Christmas hampers every December watched the bailiffs work from an upstairs window and did not come out. Not that day, and not the following week. By the 2nd week of April, the house was nearly silent during the hours Abena worked in it. No telephone ringing, no television murmuring from the sitting room. Only the sound of her own bucket scraping the tiled floor, and some mornings, Quadwo's footsteps somewhere upstairs in a house he no longer had the right to sell even 1 room of. He had moved most of what remained of his life into the smallest bedroom, the one that used to belong to his late father, and slept there on a mattress on the floor, because the bank had already taken the bed frame along with everything else with resale value. Some mornings, Quadwo came down before she arrived and made 2 cups of instant coffee instead of 1, leaving the second on the counter without comment, the same counter where he had once left her monthly pay envelope. It was not money. He had stopped pretending by then that he had any to give. But he had noticed, somewhere in those 14 empty weeks, that a woman who refused payment would sometimes still accept a cup of coffee, and that the difference between the 2 seemed to matter to her in a way he had never had reason to understand before. Abena's own deadline arrived before his did. Her granddaughter Akosua's school fees, 850 cedis for the new term, were due by the last Friday of April. And by the 3rd week of the month, Abena had 410 cedis toward it, most of it borrowed from a market trader she would now owe for months. She did not mention any of this inside the house on Teta Corsi Close. She had never once, in 14 years, brought her own troubles through that gate. And she did not intend to start on the day the family had the least to give. When the market trader who had lent her the 410 cedis offered, almost as an afterthought, to forgive the debt outright once she explained where the money had gone, Abena thanked her and repaid it anyway, 10 and 20 cedis at a time, over the following 6 weeks. She did not want anyone, not even a kind woman who meant well, keeping count of what she owed. The rainy season that year arrived early and heavy, And on the mornings it rained, the empty house amplified every drop on the corrugated roof of the garage into something closer to a drumline than weather. The sound rolling through rooms that no longer had curtains or carpets to absorb it. Abina worked through it the way she worked through everything, methodically, room by room. The smell of wet cement and her own blue soap, the only two things left in that house that still smelled the way they always had. On the last Tuesday before the auction notice went up on the gate, Kwadwo came down to the kitchen while she was rinsing the mop and handed her something small wrapped in a handkerchief. His late father's wristwatch, gold-plated, the strap worn through on one side. "Sell it," he said. "It is worth more than anything I can pay you right now." She did not sell it. She wore it home that evening on her wrist, 2 sizes too large, and did not take it off again for 3 years. It was that same week, clearing out the garage at Dexter's instruction before the council came for what was left, that Abina found a water-damaged banker's box pushed behind a stack of broken garden chairs. The cardboard gone soft at the corners, a single word written on the lid in fading marker: Archives. Inside, beneath a layer of old seed catalogs, sat a thinner folder with a typed letterhead she recognized only because she had dusted that same letterhead, framed, off a wall in Kwadwo's old office for 11 years before the office closed. Founding Members Agreement. The top page read, dated the 11th of June, 22 years earlier. She did not read further than that. She closed the folder, put it back in the box, and carried the box out to the gate with her own things that evening, the way she had carried hundreds of other boxes out of hundreds of other rooms over 31 years. Simply because something in her could not let paper go into a rubbish heap without first being looked at twice. By the following year, Kwadwo had found a small flat above a phone repair shop near Kwame Nkrumah Circle, and a modest consulting job that paid enough to cover rent and very little else. He had stopped expecting the past to return to him in any form larger than memory, and for a few months, that smaller life seemed to be enough. Then, in October, a letter arrived from his 2 former business partners, the men who had co-founded the timber finishing company with him 22 years earlier, and who had quietly taken full control of it during the 18 months he spent fighting the bank. The letter informed him that, since no original founding documentation could be located following the unfortunate events at his former residence, the partners intended to file, within 90 days, to have the company's name and the timber finishing process he had personally developed registered solely in their names. Kwadwo did not have a single page to prove otherwise. Every document that had once lived in that office had gone into a skip outside the East Legan house 18 months earlier, along with the garden tools and the broken chairs and almost everything else nobody had thought worth saving. 90 days was not a long time to produce something that, as far as he knew, no longer existed anywhere in the world. 3 weeks after the letter arrived, Abina's daughter, Nana, came to help her mother move from the single room she had rented near Kwame Nkrumah Circle for over a decade into a smaller room 2 streets over, the rent on the old one having become impossible to manage along with everything else. While clearing out the space beneath her mother's bed, Nana pulled out the water-stained banker's box marked Archives and asked, the way daughters ask about things their mothers have kept far longer than makes obvious sense, what it was. "Old papers," Abina said. "From the Owusu Boateng house." I did not want to throw them away. Nana, who had spent the previous 2 years working as a clerk at a law chambers near Osu while finishing her own legal studies part-time, opened the folder on top out of habit rather than urgency. She read the first line. She read it again. Then she sat down on the edge of her mother's bed and asked her mother to tell her, slowly, exactly where the box had come from and exactly when. If you have ever kept something for years without understanding why, only to find out later that the keeping itself was the most important thing you ever did, stay with me, because what Nana found in the second folder beneath the founding agreement, a set of technical drawings dated and initialed by all three original partners for the timber finishing process at the center of the entire dispute, was the reason a courtroom in Accra would be standing nearly full by the second week of February. Nana did not call Kwadwo Owusu-Boateng directly. She called her supervising solicitor at the chambers first, a woman named Constance Bright, who had handled 2 commercial disputes involving timber exports in the past 4 years, and who, after reading 3 pages of the folder over the phone, told Nana not to let the box leave her sight until she arrived in person. It took Constance 11 days to verify what she already suspected after the first read, that the documents were originals, not copies, that the signatures matched specimens on file at the company's registry from 22 years earlier, and that nothing in Ghanaian commercial law required a man to have kept his own paperwork in order to retain ownership of what his own signature on a properly dated document had already established. She spent 4 of those 11 days simply tracing the box's own history, asking Abina questions about garages and clearance teams and dates, until she was satisfied that the chain from Kwadwo's old office to a single room near Kwame Nkrumah Circle could be accounted for, hour by hour if necessary, in front of a magistrate. When Constance finally called Kwadwo's old phone number, the one he had kept active out of habit more than expectation, it rang 4 times before he answered. He did not say much when she explained what had been found and where. He asked one question: whose handwriting was on the box, and when she told him it did not matter whose handwriting was on the box, only whose hands had carried it out of a house that was about to be cleared for good, he was quiet long enough that Constance asked if he was still on the line. What Kwadwo did next, before he had even finished the rest of that phone call, was the first thing in 2 years that felt to him like the beginning of something, rather than the end of it. The hearing in February took less than 40 minutes once the documents were entered into evidence. The 2 former partners, through their own lawyer, did not dispute the signatures once Constance produced the registry specimens. They disputed only the manner in which the papers had survived. A line of questioning the magistrate allowed for exactly 6 minutes before ruling that the survival of a document had no bearing whatsoever on its validity. One of the 2 partners did not look up from the table in front of him for the rest of the hearing. The other asked, quietly, whether the woman who had kept the box was in the room, and was told that she was not, that she had a granddaughter's school run to manage that morning, and had simply asked Nana to call her with the result. Ownership of the company name and the timber finishing process reverted to Kwadwo Owusu-Boateng in full, along with 11 months of profits the partners had recorded under the disputed name, to be repaid over an 18-month schedule set by the court. Kwadwo did not go back to East Legon. He did not buy back the house on Tetequarshi Close, though within a year he could have. He went instead, on a Saturday morning in March, to a single room 2 streets from Kwame Nkrumah Circle, carrying nothing in his hands. Abena was hanging washing on a line strung between 2 poles outside her door when she saw him standing at the end of the corridor. She did not call out. She finished pinning the cloth she was holding before she turned fully toward him. He had not announced his visit. He had not sent Nana ahead, or Constance, or anyone else who might have prepared the corridor, or Abina, for what was coming. He simply stood there in a plain white shirt, no driver waiting at the road, no entourage. The way a man stands when he has decided that whatever he is about to say should not need an audience to mean something. "I never forgot," he said. 3 words. He did not explain them. He did not need to. He held out an envelope, the kind used for official bank correspondence, and when Abina opened it later that evening, after he had gone, she found inside it the deed to a 2-bedroom house in a quiet section of Adenta. fully paid, registered in her name and held. The accompanying letter explained, in such a way that it could never be sold, mortgaged, or transferred by anyone but her or whoever she chose, for as long as she lived. There was a second document in the envelope, shorter than the first. It named Abena Mensah as a permanent 5% shareholder in the rebuilt timber finishing company, a stake Constance had drafted at Quadro's instruction, and won that in its first full year of operation. Paid Abena more in quarterly dividends than 14 years of her old salary combined. Nana's law school fees for the following 3 years were paid in full before the end of that month, a fact Quadro mentioned to no one, and that Abena only discovered when the bursar's office called Nana to confirm the arrangement. Dexter Asante, the clearance supervisor, was not punished in any formal sense. He still cleared properties for the bank, still carried his clipboard, still arrived with 4 young men in matching polos. But the bank's policy changed that same year, after Constance filed a formal complaint on Abena's behalf, requiring every clearance team to set aside, rather than discard, any box of paper documents found on a repossessed property for a minimum of 90 days before destruction. One small, permanent line added to a checklist that had never had room for a distinction like Abena's before. Patrick, the security guard who had once kept his eyes on his phone, was the one who finally told Abena, months later, that he had felt the weight of that morning every single day since, though she had never once brought it up to him herself. The bank believed an empty house had nothing left inside it worth keeping. And for 18 months, an entire clearance industry built around that exact assumption agreed with it. But the truth is, the most valuable thing inside that house was never the table, the bed frame, or anything with a resale value attached to it. It was a habit 31 years old. The simple refusal to let paper go into a rubbish heap without first being looked at twice. And no auctioneer's inventory had a line for that. You can lose a house, a company, a name on a door. You can watch men in matching polos carry out everything you thought your life was built on. But you cannot account for what a person decides, quietly and without being asked, is worth saving. And sometimes, the thing they save without understanding why is the only reason you ever get any of it back. On Sunday mornings now, Abena waters a small garden outside a 2-bedroom house in Adenta that belongs to no one but her, wearing a gold-plated wristwatch 2 sizes too large on her wrist. The strap still worn through on one side, exactly the way it was the evening a man with nothing left to give her handed it over anyway. If you spent years doing something for someone with no expectation of ever being paid back, and one day, without warning, they remembered everything, what is the one thing you would hope they understood it actually cost you? Leave your answer in the comments below. I want to read what you would say. If stories about the people who keep showing up long after anyone would have blamed them for leaving, and what it eventually returns to them, are what you come here for, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.